Twisted Metal is Sony's longest-running video game franchise and has spanned over 8 games, 4 PlayStation consoles, and 5 presidential administrations. Each and every step of the way, it was joined by the iconic killer clown Needles Kane, aka Sweet Tooth. Twisted Metal has evolved, changed, and taken on many different forms, from being a semi-grounded car combat title in Twisted Metal 1 to becoming a silly caricature of itself in Twisted Metal 3 and 4, before moving into darker waters with the brooding horror fest of Twisted Metal Black, then followed by the playful and charming Small Brawl, until finally it settled on a combination of everything in Twisted Metal Head-On and the 2012 reboot. But through every iteration of this weird and wacky series, Sweet Tooth was evolving and changing right along with it.
Hello, it is me once again, the Twisted Metal 2012 announcer, here to tell you that you clicked on this video. Subscribe to Drew Desidue, or I will hire an actor so perfect for you that you have no choice but to fall in love with them, only to have them break your heart when you need them most, forcing you to walk this earth as an emotional zombie.
Sweet Tooth is one of 3 characters that has appeared in every release of Twisted Metal, alongside Warthog and Grim. Unlike those two, however, Mr. Tooth is the only one to be featured on the cover of every game. Without a doubt, he's the face of the franchise, and remains the most significant contribution to gaming and pop culture that Twisted Metal has ever spawned. To this day, if you bring up Twisted Metal to someone who is only vaguely aware of what it is, more often than not they'll ask, "Is that the game with the ice cream truck clown?" They may not have any concept of any other aspect of Twisted Metal, but good golly do they have this weirdo etched into their brain. So what I want to do today is take a look at Sweet Tooth and how he and his ice cream truck have adapted over the course of every Twisted Metal game, starting with Twisted Metal 1 all the way through to the 2012 reboot. I'll play each version of Sweet Tooth and see how far I can get before I game over, all the while doing my best to break down his place in this franchise and how he has evolved through each game. It'll be exciting to see how the concept of Sweet Tooth expresses itself across all the games, because I think his character and vehicle represent each game it appears in perfectly. As goes Sweet Tooth, so goes the rest of Twisted Metal, and vice versa. Before I begin, I want to make clear right away that I will be using the name Sweet Tooth and Needles Kane interchangeably. I know that there are some people who will immediately leap into the comments to tell me that, no, Needles is the clown and Sweet Tooth is the truck, which may have been true at one point, but even the games can't stick to that. Every cutscene that mentions Sweet Tooth refers to him by Sweet Tooth and not Needles. The FC Sweet Tooth driver, Sweet Tooth vehicle, not Sweet Tooth, Tasty Treats ice cream truck, with the only exception being his ending in Twisted Metal Head-On where Calypso calls him Needles.
Nobody makes you compete, Needles.
So for the sake of brevity and convenience, I will call the clown Sweet Tooth. Let's get started. In Twisted Metal 1, Sweet Tooth is an escaped mental patient in a cheap clown costume, driving a demonic ice cream truck. This is where it all began, where our little clown boy was first trotted out for the world to see. It's easy to look back now and say that it was obvious from the jump that Sweet Tooth would go on to be the face of the franchise. But during the development of Twisted Metal 1, there was no expectation that there would even be a franchise to be the face of. It wasn't until the sales and reviews rolled in that Sony and the team at SingleTrack realized the potential of car combat, with Twisted Metal leading the charge. The characters and stories for TM1 were an afterthought with little consideration for them to be taken seriously or be expanded upon later. The game wasn't supposed to be anything more than a fun diversion to blow off some steam with cars, guns, and explosions. Who cares if the guy behind the wheel of the polka dot ice cream death machine was a fleshed out character with a complicated backstory? That's just more menu clutter to skip through in order to get back into the action. Instead of the twisted serial killer clown ushering along a plague of evil that suffocates a world falling to madness that we know him as now, in Twisted Metal 1, he's just a crusty lunatic on the warpath for his best friend, who just happens to be a paper bag named Crazy Harold the Wacky Lunch Sack. And you'd better believe he goes full fisto mode on that bad boy. How many homies do you have that would go through the trouble of winning a vehicular murder contest just to see you again? Needles may be an insane, unwashed clown reeking of expired dairy products and the blood of his enemies, but he also reeks of friendship.
Do you know what they did? Do you? Now it's my turn. It's my world. It's my word. It's my turn. It's my day. Boom.
Loading into the game, we find Sweet Tooth as the first vehicle in the selection screen, hinting that on some level there may have been some understanding that this was the standout vehicle for the game. which is high praise to be held above the rest of the competitors. That includes a sleek black semi-truck driven by the literal devil, a red sports bike piloted by the actual Reaper of Souls, and a 1960s Corvette that many would consider to be the coolest car of all time. Top digs went to the demonic ice cream truck, and that decision paid off. This is the only time that Sweet Tooth will be included on the default roster until we get to Small Brawl. As in Twisted Metal 2 and 3, a password is required to unlock him, and in Twisted Metal 4, he is a boss character that is also not available when you first open up the game. Needles Kane, to my understanding, is not supernatural in any way in this game, so I don't know why his eyes glow red on the vehicle's model in the select screen. It could be a holdover from when the demonic ice cream truck was first designed and didn't yet have a driver. Or it could be that Needles is more in tune with the dark forces than he lets on. Either way, it adds a layer of intrigue to an already interesting character. His ice cream truck here is a massive white van with pink polka dots. During gameplay, the standard camera view has this behemoth taking up most of the screen as it lumbers around like a drunk giant. Back in the PS1 days, polygons were at a premium, so it's no surprise that the truck is essentially just a box with a 2D clown sprite plopped on top. It fires a napalm cone as its special that has no homing that I could notice, but does decent damage, especially when combined with his ramming ability that is greatly exaggerated in these early Twisted Metal games. His stats are very min-maxed, to quote the cool gamer kids. He scores extremely high in special weapon power and armor, but is deeply lacking in terms of speed and handling. Twisted Metal 1 is already a game that is tricky to control in the best of circumstances, let alone when you have the unenviable task of coercing this block of ice around the battlefield. Twisted Metal 1 starts you off in a 1v1 duel in a dank warehouse, so that you can prove you are worthy of moving on to the rest of the tournament. I got paired up with Darkseid, and the fight that followed was probably the worst display of car combat to ever exist. Just two hunks of steel and destruction slowly approaching one another and gently bumping until one of us died, which was me at first. I can't stress enough how bad I am at these first two Twisted Metal games, but despite that, my efforts still led to Darkseid having almost no health remaining, and didn't take much more to send him back to the underworld. It may not be impressive to many, but the fact that I made it through the first level without a game over is a great success for me. I promise later on I will have something better to show than this sad excuse for gameplay. For now, let's just appreciate the grounded art style this game is going for. The core philosophy of Twisted Metal 1, and by extension the rest of the series, is to destroy the familiar in your own backyard, to feed the fantasy of tearing apart the things that you might see in your everyday life, and give you the sensation of really ripping down a busy downtown street or suburban neighborhood, blasting everything in sight. While I wouldn't go crazy and say this game looks good or visually striking, because even by PS1 standards it was pretty rough, but I would feel comfortable saying that it does an admirable job in achieving the feeling that it was going for. Sweet Tooth here, if nothing else, is a battering ram and a glutton for close quarter slaughter. I got a lot further with this than I thought I would, which isn't saying much. I'm still baffled I made it past the character selection screen without the game somehow telling me to go myself because it doesn't like scrubs who can't get good. I got as far as Freeway Free-for-All, which is the looping highway with 5 enemies all hungering for my destruction. I took care of Spectre right out of the gate with some napalm cones and ramming, but otherwise was completely disrobed and dominated by my opponents. I made some valiant attempts at evading the enemy's wrath, but was ultimately brought down by Darkseid's truck screaming towards me, hoping my wreckage will be a pleasant meal for the fires of hell. And that's where my Twisted Metal 1 journey ended. Here's the ending for Sweet Tooth. I'm going to show the FMV ending, not the text ending. It's too boring.
Congratulations! You have won my contest. Welcome to my home.
As you know, Mr. Kane, you are now able to claim any prize you request.
You just don't know. You don't know what it was like for me. And I, and you, and them. You don't know!
Look, I'm a bit confused, Mr. Kane. You do understand, by winning High Octane, you are entitled to any request of any value. And yet, you asked me for this?
Oh man! Give me that! Give me!
A paper bag? You can't be serious.
Oh man! Down! Down! You get down the street! You said it would be easy. Do you know what they did? Do you? Now it's my turn. It's my world. It's my word. It's my turn. It's my day. Boo. Cuckoo.
Young lady, I owe you a debt of gratitude. You are welcome to stay in my realm for as long as you desire.
You guys are both sick. I'm getting out of here, and I'm taking your truck.
Sweet Tooth in Twisted Metal 1 is a long way off from fulfilling his destiny at the head of the Twisted Metal empire, but his opening act all the way back in 1995 still provided a core foundation for the rest of the series to build off of. The demonic ice cream truck commanded by a deranged and violent clown is an idea that has endured and echoed through every game. Now we move along to the unquestioned, undisputed, greatest game of all time, Twisted Metal 2. This is where we start to see the more cartoony, evil side of Sweet Tooth make its first appearance. He goes from being a middle-aged psycho in a cheap clown costume to just being an actual literal clown. In Twisted Metal 2, Sweet Tooth is once again an escaped mental patient, but now sports his iconic flaming head. He wants to be turned into a bug so that he can terrorize the tiny world of someone's backyard. The ice cream truck looks almost identical to its appearance in the first game, but its special change from being a standard rocket-type weapon that shoots in a straight line with unremarkable colors, to a bouncy pink butthole-seeking napalm cone that does solid damage and packs a huge knockback effect that the AI loves to spam, which is a good thing. Everything in this game is a good thing. Sweet Tooth here still handles like a bathtub on a greasy slip and slide, where pressing buttons to steer is a futile effort. If you want to turn in any direction, you're better off just politely asking the game to make it happen, which it won't. But not because it isn't perfect. It is perfect. You just have a skill issue. In order to play as Sweet Tooth, you have to input a secret code in the character select screen. That code can be found on the New York level if you throw yourself off into the bottomless pit in a very specific spot. Since Sweet Tooth is only accessible via cheat code, that means the only way to complete the tournament mode using him is to make your starting lives last the entire game, which for a world full of people suffering from this terrible affliction of skill issue, that's a bit of a tall order. Sweet Tooth still keeps his glowing red eyes, which makes a bit more sense here, as he is more of a supernatural quantity in this game than his first appearance. Flaming hair, magic napalm cones, and being the literal embodiment of a clown makes his glowing red eyes far less of a stretch. Hopping off the battle bus and into the crumbling ruins of LA. I tried to adjust to the controls and feel of Twisted Metal 2 that are similar to the first game but sharper. The physics are more exaggerated and arcadey. Our icy tub of buttered lube is more capable than it was in Twisted Metal 1, but not by much, especially with me at the helm. Bumping into walls or getting struck by any sort of weapon will destroy any momentum that you have and force you to accelerate from a complete stop, which is really just asking for punishment in Twisted Metal 2. Sweet Tooth has apparently gained the incredible ability to barrel roll. If Twisted Metal was a vehicular dance battle where the boogiest and freshest moves that get down with a crunktastic style were what earned the top spot, I think I have my vote who would win. But instead, this is just a plain old murder contest, and those things have no place here. So the ramming ability of the ice cream truck remains the biggest asset and mode of attack that I have at my disposal. I flattened Mr. Grimm with a few taps before moving on to dish a tasty fire missile treat to Roadkill. Thumper completed their daily challenge for fire missile intake and quit back to the lobby. Twister gobbled up some napalm cones on this hot summer day. Shadow screamed for ice cream, and then just in general because I destroyed them. Given Sweet Tooth's enormous amount of armor, it doesn't take much to stay in the battle, especially on levels like LA that have a health pickup every 5 feet or so. With Outlaw 2 destroyed, I can say that I've conquered the first level of Twisted Metal 2, an achievement only the strongest warriors can claim. But Moscow was a completely different bowl of ice cream. If LA was a dessert, with every direction overflowing with useful pickups and health, Moscow was a desert with anything that could give you a chance just straight up not showing up. In the rare case that a health pickup does enter the chat, the enemies will make absolutely positively sure that you don't get a crack at it. and that you have your heart broken in the process. A jumbled mass of enemies congealed on the rim of the bowl, and the mere exposure to them was enough to evaporate my health bar. My strategy for this map usually is just to sprint around the edge, hoping eventually enough weapons show up that I can do some meaningful damage. It's not as good of a strategy as getting good, but it has done well for me so far. Really, my favorite part about Twisted Metal 2 is that normally when someone is experiencing a piece of art, they're constantly assessing and analyzing it to determine if they think it's good or bad. But with Twisted Metal 2, you already know it's perfect, so all that extra brain power that you would usually have to spend on judging something, you can now use on other stuff like loving this game or writing long waxing poetry about why Twisted Metal 2 should be our new constitution. I love this game. I'm having fun. This game is the cool side of the body pillow. This game is all that in a bag of chips. This game is the only evidence you need to know that humanity ever made anything worth a damn. If only I was worthy of its affection. Like a forbidden fruit in the garden of truth, I am left unable to taste the sweet perfection of this game, for fear that perhaps my mortal mind will fail in its gaze and I won't live up to what it wants. What it doesn't realize is that there's no madness like that of not understanding Twisted Metal 2 the way the rest of the world does. Anyways, I made it to Paris and got rocked by Outlaw 2, who put Sweet Tooth out of his misery so that we can move on to Twisted Metal 3. Here's Sweet Tooth's Twisted Metal 2 ending, where he turns into a bug and gives the old slice and dice to a ladybug.
The Twisted Metal contest was granted an audience with the founder of the competition. I had agreed to grant the winner any prize they requested. There would be no limits on price, size, or in this case, even reality. Sweet Tooth told me he wanted to live out his greatest fantasy, to become a bug in a tiny little garden out in the country. It would be a life of relaxation and love, a life of peace, a final escape from his madness. The night sky exploded with light. And when the light faded, Sweet Tooth had gotten his wish. For the rest of his days, he enjoyed his new life in the garden, away from all those who would tell him he was crazy. The other insects were not fans of their new neighbor, for he had a tendency to kill them. Oh, but Sweet Tooth was happy, and whenever he got lonely for human companionship, or for human flesh, all he had to do was look up and dream of the day when he would crawl out of the garden and back into the world of man. Oh, I am Calypso, and I thank you for playing Twisted Metal.
In Twisted Metal 3, Sweet Tooth returns and plays up the circus aspects of his character, much more than other entries. His hair is only orange and made to look like fire than actual flames. This version of Sweet Tooth is the biggest change yet, both to his character and his vehicle. I don't say this lightly, but Sweet Tooth here is a disgusting freak that has no place in this universe or any other. Whoever designed this man needs to have their artist license revoked and be publicly shamed post-haste. Not even a stupid jazz hands and bow tie can save him. The only way I would excuse this design of Sweet Tooth is if you can prove to me that the artist was somehow possessed by a demon from a dimension made entirely out of middle fingers while they were drawing this dude. The truck is similar to its TM1 and 2 style, but they replaced the 2D clown sprite on top with this monstrosity that is somehow worse than the character portrait. Sweet Tooth is only accessible via cheat code once again, along with Minion. It's unclear why that is. It could be that the developers wanted there to be some air of mystery and gravity to Sweet Tooth, some way to elevate the poster boy above the rest of the rabble in the contest, while still keeping him as a non-boss vehicle. Or maybe they wanted to hide this hideous hog huffer from the world so that it's the player's fault for going out of their way to find him. My personal theory is that Sweet Tooth in Twisted Metal 3 is such an unplayable mess that it was the only way to make it even remotely okay to include him. What I mean by that is the way the physics express themselves in Twisted Metal 3 is much different than they did in Twisted Metal 1 and 2. Twisted Metal 3 was developed by an entirely different studio from the first two, and thus has a group of people working with their own understanding of what Twisted Metal should feel like, in addition to a completely new engine used for the game that was based on one used for a racing title. That leads to the cars in Twisted Metal 3 having a more realistic and heavy feel to them, but because the cars in Twisted Metal are tearing around an arena in unpredictable and crazy ways, the realistic physics struggle to keep the cars under control and often will just cause them to tip over. Some have it worse than others, but none worse than Sweet Tooth, who is allergic to staying on four wheels. The truck has similar attributes as it did before, with high armor and special weapon power, but limited with speed and handling. The special here is another retooled napalm cone that has a huge blast radius, but must be manually detonated. Hollywood was cleared relatively easily, despite my utter inability to drive more than a few seconds without ending up upside down. Washington, D.C. was a bit more involved with the way the enemies were fiending for health at an alarming rate, as they tend to do in TM3. As soon as a health pops up, boom, an enemy is slobbering over themselves to go get it. Still, I made it all the way to Darkseid without dying, which is only marginally better than nothing. Darkseid joined the match in progress, and within 10 seconds they already made an example out of me, tossing my little truck like a used tissue and roasting me on the rotisserie of their wrath. Round 2 was a quick KO for me, and that gave me a clear runway to Hangar 18, and it went a little bit like this. Map is severely OP, but for a clumsy box of drunk like Sweet Tooth, it is a monumental achievement to get there and grab it. For the next level, the North Pole with all of its uneven terrain is a nightmare for Mr. Tooth to navigate, but I defied the odds and persevered because no good story has ever ended with the deranged ice cream demon giving up and going home when the going got floppy. The only real thing of note that happened was Club Kid cut me down on my way to Santa's house, and I denied Warthog health that he was desperate for. Because if Sweet Tooth is the guy outmaneuvering you for a health pickup, it may be time to reevaluate some things, old man.
I'm a warrior, a survivor. I fought on battle.
Sweet Tooth's journey in Twisted Metal 3 ended in London when the roving gang of AI dominated me. Here's his ending. He wants more ice cream, but forgot to brush between snacks and now has to get eviscerated by dental equipment, I guess.
Your wish is to eat all the candy and ice cream you want? Your wish is granted. You should have brushed between snacks. I am Calypso, and I thank you for playing Twisted Metal.
On to Twisted Metal 4, the biggest change for Sweet Tooth arguably in the entire series. In Twisted Metal 4, Sweet Tooth has taken over Twisted Metal after wresting control from Calypso. The circus style is still prominent in his design, but his hair is back to being literal fire. Sweet Tooth was a young boy when the Twisted Metal tournament came to his town for the first time. See, this game changed the history of the contest to be something of a traveling show held by the ringleader Calypso. It inspired a young Sweet Tooth to take up Twisted Metaling of his own, and his prize for winning was to become the star of the show, which in many ways is true in real life, as Sweet Tooth remains the face and most popular character of the series in real life. After some time of dominating the field, Sweet Tooth grew tired of only getting the scraps of the spoils of his efforts. He's doing all the real work while Calypso just, kicks back reading his dirty magazines or whatever? No, Sweet Tooth takes matters into his own gloved hands and seizes the means of destruction from Calypso, and takes the tournament over for himself and his crew of clown clones. For whatever reason, Sweet Tooth made himself the final boss of the contest, which means he has to be killed in order to win. Calypso never forced you to fight him, so I'm not sure why Sweet Tooth does. Him being the final boss also means he is ridiculously powerful, to the point that most players will just resort to cheap and cheesy tactics to get past him. They'll use remote mines in such a way that it catapults him out of the map entirely, destroying him instantly. Sweet Tooth is also playable, but must be unlocked by completing the game at least one time, or with cheats. Sweet Tooth in Twisted Metal 4 is a rolling cheat code himself, just an absolute steamroller with limitless power. I'll spare you the boring details of my adventure through this game. It was mostly just driving in circles, spraying the henchman special until the screaming stopped. Sweet Tooth's truck got a major upgrade in the visual department too, now with a much more sporty and menacing look, including a massive supercharger blower sticking out of the hood, and a less horrifying head on top. Sweet Tooth himself is a smiling goblin with flaming hair, and the most insane pants in the whole franchise. Dude is wild with these stripes. He has with him an army of clones, all made in his image. His right-hand clown is named Melvin, and does all the talking for Sweet Tooth during every ending movie. I rolled through the entire game with little resistance, and zero threat of losing any of my 4 lives. Absurd. Moving on.
3 months in the nut house.
In Twisted Metal Black, Sweet Tooth takes on his most iconic and memorable appearance. A dark, twisted serial killer with a clown mask, whose spree of murders led to his capture and attempted execution, where he was cursed by the preacher to wear the head of flames. Sweet Tooth loses his circus clown appearance, giving way to a large, shirtless man wearing a clown mask and stained polka dot pants with leather suspenders. His wish is to break the curse, but that would mean to stop his evil ways. His voice is low and sinister, Tooth, he's well-spoken and haunting in his words. He looks like a horror villain pulled right out of your nightmares, rather than some schlubby birthday clown with a night gig as a creepo or a circus clown boy that no amount of fire would be enough to vanquish from existence. Sweet Tooth in Twisted Metal Black is so instrumental to this game's world, story, and presentation that it all, in fact, takes place within his dark, corrupted mind. Twisted Metal Black hides a major twist that's revealed only when you progress through the game as Minion, which you can unlock after beating the game with every other character. Where other characters have inner monologue that displays during the loading screen, Minion presents a series of coded messages that, when translated, read, "I do not think this is real. I must speak in code or he will discover me. We are trapped in his head. This is how he sees the world, how Sweet Tooth sees his life. It is not real. All of us are trapped in his head. I miss the old colorful world. We will return to our world one day. In the real world, my name is Marcus Kane." These messages completely flip on its head how we understand Black and its world. The game isn't just a dark adaptation of the old Twisted Metal, like slapping a sinister coat of paint on the beloved and familiar franchise just for shock value. This world is a specific brand of darkness. It's the representation of a twisted, broken psyche inside the mind of a serial killer clown. Every character afflicted with the dark disease, every environment crumbling under the weight of unchecked evil, every ounce of chaos is a result of Needles Kane taking the reins away from Marcus to fully commandeer Sweet Tooth. Depending on your interpretation, either Needles is projecting his own dark perception onto the real world as an elaborate hallucination, or he is imagining the world of Twisted Metal Black whole cloth. Sweet Tooth the truck also gets an overhaul, with its design resembling more of a 1950s or 60s van, a classic and nostalgic box whose tasty treats have long been vacated. Its special weapon is ridiculous, with its truck transforming into a mech monster that unleashes a storm of missiles that do enormous damage. My playthrough here was a breeze because of that. Sweet Tooth here is far from being the fastest or most agile vehicle in the game, but with the new physics and power of the PlayStation 2, his truck has never felt better. Control and speed are admirable for what has always been a tub in these games. The competition was shredded like a hot knife through melted ice cream. Junkyard took a bit of acclimating to the controls of Black after playing the PS1 entries, but once I got rolling, it was no chance for the enemies. I sped all the way through to the 6th level, Snowy Roads, where I got way too cute with my strategy of baffling the opponents to the point they just give up and throw themselves off a cliff. But turns out I was the one who fell off a cliff and then got torched by the enemies who have had quite enough of my shit. That moves us along to Small Brawl. We go from the most iconic, lasting version of Sweet Tooth that is oozing with dark, mature themes, to the version of him that's probably the most forgotten about in a game that tries its best to distance itself from the upsetting stories of Black in an effort to appeal to a younger audience. In Twisted Metal Small Brawl, Sweet Tooth is the youngest and most mischievous contestant and only wants a little ice cream. Since he's a child, he doesn't have his signature flames, but instead just has orange-colored hair in the shape of fire. He pilots an RC ice cream truck whose special weapon is a spinning ice cream that slides along the ground and can split off into even more ice cream if it hits its target. It maintains its place as a slow, high-armor vehicle with a powerful special. Needles doesn't get as much time in the spotlight as he did in Black, but he is featured on the cover. The design of the truck is similar to that of another 50s, 60s style van, but of course shrunk down as a teeny RC car with the iconic clown head attached to the antenna rather than on the top of the vehicle. I really wish I had more to say about this version, but after Black, all I can really declare is that it's as opposite of that as possible. The playthrough was smooth, as Small Brawl is on the easier side of the franchise with its difficulty. I was crushing everything in the way of this Tooth so sweet, all the way to the first boss battle against Trapper on Mini Golf Mayhem, where he made quick work of my little truck. I put up a valiant effort, the only thing one could ask of anyone, but it was all ultimately too much for my feeble gaming skills to match. My truck burst into tiny flames on the fake grass of this mini golfery.
Man, you could have had anything you wanted, and all you could think of is a little ice cream? Let me down! Stop the car! Who's the blue lady?
In Twisted Metal Head-On, Sweet Tooth retains the design from Black, if not more cartoony and whimsical. He is still a well-spoken creepshow that is confident and sinister in everything that he does and has little regard for human life. It's still a serial killer clown wearing a mask versus a literal embodiment of a clown. This is also the first game in the series that explicitly states that Needles and Marcus Kane are the same person. Black hinted at that reality, but only made mention that the game exists in Sweet Tooth's mind, with that revelation given to us by Marcus, but Their relationship was not clearly laid out. Marcus Kane, the driver of Roadkill, reveals in his ending that he wants to break free of this fake world and go back to his normal life without Twisted Metal. When he is sent back, he sees in his reflection Needles Kane, who says he hates being back in that place.
I never did like this place.
In the Darktooth ending, we see Marcus and Needles piloting the massive ice cream truck together and stumbling upon Towertooth, the final boss, in a large field that seems like some other dimension altogether. They climb aboard and fade to black. That's it. That's all we really see of that Marcus and Needles Kane dichotomy. Sweet Tooth's story here has no mention of Marcus or either of the boss teeth. Sweet Tooth the truck is sort of a mix between the version from Black and Small Brawl, still a 50s-60s style ice cream van, instead of the large box from the first 3 games. No surprise, it's a slow, lumbering block of metal with decent armor, but like Twisted Metal Black, the physics are smooth to the point that despite its poor handling stat, it still feels good to drive and navigate the arenas. The special packs a punch and returns to its napalm cone roots that deal decent damage and when upgraded can unleash several at once to extend your damage output even further. Like Small Brawl, Twisted Metal Head-On is on the more accessible and easy side of the difficulty spectrum, so even on hard mode I still tore through most of the game. The only downside is that due to a bug in the PS2 port of Head-On, extra lives don't regenerate between levels, unless you exit back to the main menu and reload a save. So for added challenge, I did none of that. Big Blue Stadium took just a couple minutes to clear, with Speedy Boy Grim being the hardest opponent to track down and take out. LA was not much more difficult, as the upgrades gained from destroying opponents, adding an entirely new level of ass-kicking. Paris fell to my immense power in a matter of minutes because these upgraded machine guns are an actual cheat code. Cousin Eddie, the mega-sized simpleton who somehow recruited an army of boomhowers to be his henchmen, was a bit trickier than it should have been because he just refused to show me a side panel. When he did, the Hurricane Force ass-whooping was initiated and he erupted into a massive fireball. Roman ruins happened, probably, I don't know. This snow globe was a bit longer to tangle with because of its size, but it's all just destruction with a little bit of built-in patience. Sweet Tooth headed to Monaco and left the small nation-state in utter ruin, Crimson Fury opting to just throw himself into the sea rather than face my wrath. Transylvania, like the snowy Wonderland map, was only hard because it's so big. But big and hard maps are never a problem for the man of creamed ice. Just makes the hunt more satisfying. Tokyo Streets was mostly uneventful, yawn. Tokyo Rooftops was where I met my first death, as I tend to do for some reason, which is the worst time because it gives me no chance to get my upgrades back as only a handful of enemies will be remaining. I made it all the way to the final boss where the much larger teeth ripped me an entirely new suite despite my best effort. Right before the finish line, I was cut down by Towertooth, but it was a good try nonetheless.
Oh well, I guess we'll have to clean that up later. Now then, about your prize, Needles Kane, what is your wish?
You know, Calypso, I've been looking at this face for a long time. I think it's time for a change.
That's your wish? You want a facelift?
Not quite. We've been doing this a long time, haven't we? You hold a twisted metal, I kill and destroy for you. I make a wish, you continue to sit on your throne, surrounded by your guards and women. I think you've had enough fun for a while.
Nobody makes you compete, Needles.
Right, of course not. Not at all.
Make your wish and claim your prize already. I have things to do that don't involve you.
Okay, pal of mine. I wish that you become me, and I become you.
Are you insane? I won't grant that wish.
I don't think you have a choice, Sunshine.
You see, what I say goes. This is impossible. Guards, kill the intruder!
Ooh, good idea. Do that. Looks like we've got 2 bodies to clean up now. Guards? and where did my women go?
Honorable mention from me, the Twisted Metal 2012 announcer. Sweet Tooth was meant to appear in the sequel to Twisted Metal. Black as a character, playable both in his vehicle and on foot. A version of this on-foot Sweet Tooth is featured in the PlayStation 2 port of Twisted Metal, Head On, known as the Extra Twisted Edition. The mode is called Sweet Tour, and it sees Sweet Tooth navigating the dank halls of the Blackfield Asylum, collecting factoids that dispense behind-the-scenes information about our favorite car combat franchise. He is a chungy-wungy, rotund mass of clown ass. TM 2012 announcer out.
On to our last Sweet Tooth, but arguably the one with the most story. In Twisted Metal 2012, Sweet Tooth is one of 3 characters who actually have a story and returns to his more gritty, horror-inspired version from Black. But this time, we finally get to see more of what his life was like before he transformed into an unflinching monster of murderous mayhem. We get to see what he was like as Marcus Kane. He starts out with a simple suburban life, a man with a loving family with several kids, a job as an ice cream man, serving his tasty treats to a neighborhood of adoring customers, and a house that might as well be on the cover of Home and Garden. Despite his seemingly perfect life, Marcus was burdened with this growing darkness that day after day would creep further through his mind, some demonic force calling out, hoping that he'll finally pick up. One day he did. Using the wood from a coffin that had housed a notorious serial killer, he carved his iconic mask and relented control of himself to this mysterious demonic force. Sweet Tooth killed the old Marcus, his body now just a vessel for this unknown evil. For his first murders, he would target Marcus's family to leave no end loose or untied. However, the daughter, Sophie Kane, put up more of a fight than expected and was able to escape after slamming a pair of scissors into his eye. Sweet Tooth was then on a mission to track her down and finish what he started. His search was unsuccessful, eventually leading him to the hospital where she was admitted to after the horrifying and catastrophic psychological trauma she endured at the hands of the monster her father became. Sweet Tooth got to the hospital too late. She was already discharged. With no other options, Sweet Tooth enters the Twisted Metal tournament with the promise that winning would bring him to where she's been hiding all these years. The ice cream truck here takes on a totally new style. No longer the round 50s, 60s style van. It rolls in this time around as a large box, but not the silly, rumbling behemoth from the first 2 games. It's more sleek and aggressive, with spikes and sharpened metal jutting out and lining its edges. It's an ice cream truck bred for war, with the floppy clown head on a spring on top. I don't think I need to say that it's slow and loaded with armor because it is in every game, but it is here too. Its special weapon is now a laughing clown missile that can go through walls to find its target. But because Twisted Metal 2012 gives every vehicle at least 2 specials, his alternate is to turn into a bipedal mech that can fly, known as Sweetbot. In that form, he can run, jump, and slam into the ground, causing a shockwave that knocks opponents back. He can also throw his head, causing pretty good damage and ending the special. Otherwise, you can just stay as the mech as long as you want. I tried to get through the entire Sweet Tooth campaign without dying or even switching vehicles in the garage, so basically Deathless Plus, all on the hard difficulty, which is actually medium since normal is easy and twisted is hard. It's stupid. Anyways, this was smooth enough on the first couple of levels, as they are just basic death matches, where Sweet Tooth shines as a beefy bot that can take a ton of punishment and dish out even more. There is little bad to say about Sweet Tooth in any game, except Twisted Metal 3. At worst, he's an above-average contestant, like in Twisted Metal 1 and 2, and at best, he's among the top tier of playable characters, like in Black in 2012, with Twisted Metal 4 showing him off as being in a completely different league from the rest of the vehicles. When it got to the Juggernaut battle, I had no real issue taking down the truck and trailer before it could poop out more enemies, but I had some close calls cleaning up the rest of the field. Sweet Tooth is elite at evading, given his ability to fly on command. If things get dicey, you can just leave and go somewhere less shooty. My biggest hurdle would be the race. That is normally no challenge whatsoever, so long as you choose one of the fast cars like Crimson Fury or Death Warrant, but this is the Sweet Tooth show. The only objective is to follow the checkpoints all the way down to the end of the level and back. first. Meanwhile, a full grid of cluttering opponents are in the way, some of which in those fast cars I mentioned a moment ago, and all attacking you and you alone. There is no way that I would have been able to keep up in a straight line, so my only option was to destroy everyone who was faster than me, which is most people. Thankfully, those enemies tend to be the ones with little in the way of armor. Mega Gun and Power Missiles became the weapon of choice as they can offer the most damage in the shortest amount of time, as long as you can land the shot. But with everyone driving in a pretty predictable path, that was not much of an issue. At first, I was concerned that they would be too fast for me no matter what I did, but turbo blaring and guns blasting, I became a screaming meat grinder, crunching and chewing up everyone ahead of me, littering my wake with scrap and wreckage until all I had left to beat were the other slowpokes. I finished way ahead of them and actually won the race in a van that I had no business even coming close with. That leaves us now with the Brothers Grimm, the boss fight against two huge monster trucks and the only battle left in this exploration of Sweet Tooth. And I don't even get to use his ice cream truck, as the game forces you to use roadkill for whatever reason. Needles is still in the driver's seat, so it'll have to do for now. These guys are as easy as peasy gets and are just really big teddy bears. After taking out a monster truck, the other one goes into turtle mode, meaning my gunner will have to climb into its belly to arm some explosives. And instead of picking him up after that, I just blew up the whole thing. Before I killed the first Mr. Grimm truck, I left the other one with no health, so that when the next phase started, it would only take a stiff breeze to finish him off. And a quick note, despite the fact that I didn't bother to collect my gunner after he planted the boom pack, he still found a way to hop back in my car after the dust settled, so I guess he's fine. Sweet Tooth claims his prize from Calypso, who sends him where his daughter's been hiding all these years. But twisty wisty, she's been dead the whole time. After she left the hospital, she decided that living with the trauma and pain of what Sweet Tooth did to her and her family, and the constant fear that he'll come back for her, was too much to bear, and she took the matter into her own hands. Sweet Tooth is teleported to inside her coffin, buried under like a mile of rock and dirt, never to be seen or heard from again. And yeah, that's where Sweet Tooth's story ends, so far. But given how fucking great the Twisted Metal TV show is on Peacock, I am confident that Sony will finally see the potential this franchise has now that there's a version of it that is fleshed out and has a rich world to build out and expand. So maybe we see Sweet Tooth return to gaming soon. For now, we have no official word, but we have reason to hope. Have a great day.